Hello and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory.
And I'm Demiake Mwakaliele. This is In Focus.
Well, we begin in Nigeria, where the ruling People's Democratic Party has selected President Goodluck Jonathan as its candidate in April's presidential election.
Well, Mr. Jonathan won 2,736 votes compared to 805 for former Vice President Atiku Abubakar. Abubakar has been sharply critical of the president, saying he has failed to bring stability to the nation.
Abubakar, a Muslim from northern Nigeria, also criticized President Jonathan, a Christian from southern Nigeria, for breaking a traditional power-sharing agreement for the nation's highest office.
And well, joining us now on the phone from Abuja, Nigeria, is Voice of America's West Africa correspondent Scott Stearns. Scott, it's good to have you on the other line there in Abuja. Well, this is obviously a very great victory for Mr. Jonathan. Can we say that his nomination was ever in question, or was this a surprise?
It was a question, not that an incumbent president might not always be expected to receive the ruling party nomination, but certainly because of this regional power-sharing deal that you discussed. This informal arrangement within the ruling party that rotated the presidential nominee between North and South said that northern Nigeria was established to have another 4 years in power, what would have been the second term of the late President Umaru Musa. Instead, Mr. Jonathan contested the nomination on his own 8 months after taking power, and won the party primary.
And speaking about Northerners, of course, that's where Mr. Abubakar is from. How do you explain his lack of nomination? He lost to Mr. Jonathan by almost 2,000 votes. That's a really big gap, wouldn't you say?
He did. It was certainly an uphill challenge for Mr. Abubakar, even the regional power sharing notwithstanding, largely because Mr. Jonathan has only been in office 8 months. So he's been there, long enough to have the sympathy of having taken power following the death of President Yar'Adua, and some of the glow still of having only been in office 8 months, but not really long enough to have made super big enemies. And most people feel that Mr. Jonathan has done a reasonable job in his time in office. He drew support from both northern and southern states in pursuing the party nomination, having worked hard as the incumbent to convince northern governors that Nigeria is mature enough now to select a nominee based on who's best qualified, not where they're from.
Now, what about Mr. Abubakar's point that because Mr. Jonathan seemed to disregard this in-place agreement of the North-South rotation, that he cannot be trusted? Could this influence voters maybe in April?
It might. Mr. Jonathan will have more difficulty attracting northern voters now than he would if he were the ruling party nominee under this regional power-sharing deal, where northern voters might feel that it was his due because it was their time. But the People's Democratic Party is really the only truly national party in Nigeria. The last 3 of its nominees have been elected president, so Mr. Jonathan is clearly the front runner.
Now, just very briefly, Scott, if you could answer the last question. Of course, Mr. Jonathan will be facing other contenders in April. Who are these other opposition parties who are running against him, and how would he fare?
Well, those, as I say, those parties are somewhat smaller. He's being challenged by Nuhu Ribadu, a former anti-corruption fighter, but he may face Mr. Abubakar again in the general election in April if the former vice president decides to be the nominee of one of the other parties.
Well, Scott Stearns, thanks so much for joining us all the way there from Abuja, and I guess we'll be hearing from you again soon. Take care.